Hello and welcome everybody to the Aftershock with Jamon Moore, Alex Morgan, and Robert Jonas. I'm Phil Leyva, and we are joining you live after a 1-0 victory for the San Jose Earthquakes over the Vancouver Whitecaps. And who else scored but Christian Espinoza, and the Quakes escaped with 3 points. Jamon, you are currently at the stadium now, and we're going to kick it over to you first so you can give us your initial thoughts after the match.
Yeah, it was a not the prettiest of games, that's for sure. I mean, some people even joked that the Quakes even practice, over the last, few games since they played Tigres, or last few days since they played Tigres. At times it was pretty rough, and I did not like the way they came out defensively. I didn't like the way that they came out and set up because it gave too much liberty to the Vancouver 3-5-2, and with a very potent 2 up top, I felt there was too much liberty to be able to penetrate and be able to either get the ball wide to the wingbacks or even find one of the strikers in behind. And I tweeted about it and said, look, they need to move to something more like a 4-4-2, which for the most part they did. They just did it at certain opportune times based upon, where the ball was at on the pitch. And then ultimately, Luchi went, with the old 3 in the back. And, as has happened after it didn't work early in the season, and as I keep telling Alex Morgan, it will work more often than not. And tonight, it worked long enough. And that's all you can say about it. It worked long enough. But look, credit to Daniel, who absolutely put in that performance that we got used to seeing and then kind of went away a little bit. And now, Daniel's back. The 3 points, a lot of it, credit to the way that the performance that he put in tonight. He really, really pissed off the Vancouver fans. They were chanting F words at him toward the end of the game from the supporters section. It was fantastic. Oh, by the way, Luchi's already showing up here. So
Alex, the tried and true 4-4-2 coming through for Luchi here. Do you agree with Jamon? Do you think that this was the formation that was the saving grace for them in the match?
Look, Luchi made good in-game adjustments at halftime. The Quakes were getting pummeled. They weathered that second half very, very well. But I believe we're going to be going right now to Luchi Gonzalez.
For joining tonight's post-game press conference following our 1-0 victory over Vancouver Whitecaps FC. We'll start with the first question from Alex Morgan.
Hey, Luchi. Thanks for joining us tonight. Good to speak to you. Congratulations on the
Hey, looks like we lost the press conference, Robert. Just the two of us here for a moment. So, Robert, I can't tell if your audio is on or not. Can you hear me? It is. So it looks like we have lost the press conference for just a moment, but we'll get things fixed here. I'm going to check in with Alex and Jamon, and so if y'all can just hang tight, we'll be right back with you.
Apologize. I think we lost the stream there. Or at least I did.
Have we lost Phil here? Are we down a man?
Well, I also lost the stream, I think. So
Okay.
all right.
Well, we had a chance to ask a couple questions there at the end, and it sounds like they're happy with the smash and grab aspect of tonight's victory, and they'll take 3 points any way they can get it. So that was kind of a message I got.
Is Phil back from the ether now? Phil, you made it back?
Yeah, I went to go get a drink of water. I did text you guys to see what was going on, and I picked up my cat, and she shed all over me, so I have cat hair, like my mouth, everything. It's pretty bad.
Is this what goes on behind is that what everybody else is doing while me and Jamon are in the press conferences? Is that what always happens?
Oh man.
I don't know.
All right. I'm gonna step out to try to get to catch a player before they leave on the bus. So I'm gonna let you three kind of analyze in the press conference. I think they didn't get to hear it. So, kind of replay for them, Luchi's comments, and apologies to everyone because I could not hear a thing in the press conference and I had to make an adjustment on my side to be able to ask a question. So apologies. But I'm gonna leave you three here and let you keep going. So Alex, you got the con.
Me and Robert can hopefully help cover some of what was going on in that press conference. If they weren't able to hear any of it, Phil, were you not able to hear any of it? Are we gonna have to do a live reading?
We were just sitting here, and then Robert couldn't hear me, so I was trying to talk to Robert for a second, and then I waited, tried texting. Since we didn't get anything, or I didn't get anything in return, I just kind of
we're back to preseason form again. We got to get back in regular season form.
Well, we just had that long break for Leagues Cup. Clearly, we're a little out of practice here, so kind of like the Quakes offense. But
all right, guys, I'll be rejoining you in a bit. I'm going to go try to grab an interview, and I'll bring it back.
Go for it, James.
All right,
we appreciate you, Jamie.
You know what it was like, guys? It was like when the substitute teacher just leaves the classroom and then there's nobody except for the kids in the classroom and they're just running everything. It was like that.
All right. Robert, how about this? I can play all of the reporters. You can be Luchi Gonzalez. We can do a live reenactment of this press conference here. How does that sound?
We can do our best, but I don't know if I can do justice to the Luchi's positivity that he spun on what was arguably a not the best performance. But hey, when you get 3 points, you don't really question the details. So
you don't have a good Luchi Gonzalez impression? Is that what you're saying? You're letting us down here?
I really need to. I mean, I know his wardrobe may not be what we expected it to be. A little more casual than I was expecting, given his introduction a year ago, almost about a year ago now, last Wednesday. But if I had to give a Luchi impression, it was this: that he is extremely proud of the way the guys played tonight, despite being sort of on the back foot for most of the game, and like you asked, really a question about kind of being I don't think the word was ambushed. You had a better word for it. Pummeled, right? Was that the word you asked?
He took issue with it.
He took a little bit of issue with pummeled, but I think when he looks at the raw numbers and the XG, he's not going to argue too much with that assessment. This was a game where you lose some games when you have the XG advantage, and sometimes you win the games when you don't have the XG advantage. And for a Quakes team that I would say looks at a Vancouver as a competitor for one of those last playoff spots, this was vital. I mean, that's 6 points on the season that they've now taken from the Whitecaps, and that's 6 points that the Whitecaps are going to have to overcome if they're going to take the place of the Quakes in the playoff positions.
Robert, who needs a press conference when we have you to break everything down here so well?
I've said this before. I think I've covered enough press conferences that I could probably reenact any press conference successfully, but I don't want to just provide a disservice to our viewers who demand the real thing. But it was that was my take home. I'm sure they're going to be more than happy to get on that plane, take those 3 points securely in their take home luggage, and get back to San Jose as soon as they can.
Yeah, 100%. And I opened the press conference asking him about the way that they played, because they were pummeled in the first half. And that's what I told Luchi Gonzalez. And he thought about it for a second. And then he said, okay, maybe that's fair. I don't think he liked the word pummeled used to describe this team's performance. But the reason I said that was because, Vancouver Whitecaps had 1.5 XG. The Earthquakes had less than 0.5 XG. They really only had one chance this whole game. Vancouver Whitecaps were putting shot on target after shot on target in that first half. And I think if Luchi Gonzalez goes back and watches that game tape again, he'll understand where that question was coming from. But we want to give him credit because the way that they adjusted in that second half and the way that they held on was really admirable. And I think that's what he was taking away more, is that smash and grab mentality, the grit that they had to have to get through that one, because that's not a situation where the Quakes would have been able to hold on in the first half of the season. The first half of the season, we saw them time after time give away those late leads and let critical points slip here and there. But then the other question that was key was Robert's question at the end, saying, look, this is a big 6-pointer. You're playing a game against a Western Conference rival. How does this make you feel about your chances going forward in the playoffs? And he was optimistic about that. The takeaway from this one, regardless of what happened in the performance, he was happy with this one because of where it leaves them in the table, one step closer to the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think Jamon had a really good point, and the coach agreed. The Quakes did a very good job of congesting the middle of the field as the game went into the second half, and that just forced Vancouver into cross after cross after cross, and the Earthquakes were ready for it. Bringing in Jonah Mensah was a very good idea. He's a guy who's got that aerial ability. He's not going to be fast, but you don't have to cover a lot of ground when you're basically defending in the attacking third for the remainder of the game, that last 20 minutes. And none of the Quakes defenders really put a wrong step forward. Daniel made all the saves he had to do in the first half and really didn't have a lot of stellar moments, but didn't need to make the stellar moments in the second half, as the Quakes really saw this game through. It's a fantastic sign for a team that's going to need, I would expect at times in these remaining 10 games of the season, to have that kind of defensive wall to see out games, whether it be a point on the road or a win on the road like tonight, or to ensure a victory at PayPal Park in some of the games they have left. These are going to be the points that they're going to have to get to make up and potentially to make keep the difference in their favor when it comes to finishing in the top 8.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we've repeated throughout the year as well, and that's how important Daniel has been for this squad. I mean, making save after save, right? The team honestly wouldn't have been able to hold on without him. I think at some point Vancouver would have broken through. They had a lot of really great chances. But speaking of chances, I did want to talk a bit about the goal that the Quakes scored, because we haven't really gone into the specifics yet, into the what that looked like in the buildup and the finish and everything leading up to it. One thing that I thought was really interesting was up to that point in the match, the Quakes had really struggled with their with a lot of the technical stuff, right? The passing, they weren't making very many things happen. They were losing possession. And this was a moment in which, a lot of folks were in the Slack chat, right, for Quakes Epicenter, we're talking about how poorly they thought Cade Cowell was playing in terms of his decision-making, his one-on-one. And it was Cowell who actually started that counterattack, right? He goes back and he receives the ball far back in their own third of the pitch, and he sends it over to the right flank to find Christian Espinoza. And I know, Alex, last time that you and I were together over at PayPal Park, we were talking about how Espinoza really has to be on one end or the other of these counterattacks for them to even be effective, right? And a lot of times they have to rely on him to be on the end of it. Well, he was there as part of he was the catalyst leading into that, and he ended up helping move the ball forward. Which eventually led to Jamon Montero getting the ball and then crossing it back over to Espinoza for him to score the goal. But I thought it was quite interesting that, a lot of folks were already talking about, oh no, Cowell is playing so poorly. This doesn't look good for the transfer news that just came out, the $3 million to Bologna with the $5.5 million incentives total, and really focusing in on Cowell. So it was Cowell, though, that started that counterattack. Alex, I'm curious about your thoughts here, though. I mean, you guys talked a lot about this transfer and what it could mean for the team. I mean, are you kind of on board with a lot of the fans who were disappointed in Cowell's performance overall? Or are you seeing some of the light here that I'm seeing as well?
Look, the Quakes did what they needed to do tonight. They didn't muster anything offensively, but they had one dangerous chance and they made it count. And then they were able to bunker and withstand the rest of the pressure. And for that reason, Cade Cowell put in a solid shift. His defensive shift was solid. They didn't let a lot of chances down that left-hand side, and he came up big when it mattered. So there's no complaints with Cade Cowell's performance tonight. A performance like this will make him look good in the transfer market. With all this, pressure surrounding him and with all the hype surrounding him right now, to be able to step out there and play confidently, calmly, and collectedly is important. And he did that well tonight. And it was a gorgeously executed counterattack. That was the pitch perfect counterattack. Cade had to drop back into the middle and anticipate that ball getting sprayed out and popping out in the middle there. And he was just fast enough to get in front of his defender. Really good awareness to play it in to Jamon Montero there. Jamon Montero was struggling to get connected in this game. If there's one person who I would be disappointed in, it is Jamon Montero, because he was not able to shut down Andres Cubas. And that was one thing that Luchi Gonzalez talked about extensively in his press conference, was just how much trouble they were having with Andres Cubas. And the fact that Vancouver Whitecaps were able to play out of the back more than they were expecting. They were able to move the ball through the midfield and get a numbers advantage in the midfield because Andres Cubas was finding space and connecting passes and skirting around Jamon Montero. So Jamon Montero is probably, if we're going to talk about the offensive production and kind of the bigger picture with issues this team might have going forward, is probably where I'd put that asterisk. But he played a perfect ball. Jeremy Abobasi played a perfect run. And it's a beautiful early cross into Christian Espinosa. All of the runs they made were good. Cade Cowell, not only did he make the initial pass, but he continued his run, drew a defender with him to the front post. And that's what allowed Christian Espinosa to have a wide open sitter at the back post. It looks so simple when you execute it that well, but it's not simple. And it takes a lot of detail in like very fast-paced situations, and the Earthquakes stepped up to the plate on that one.
Alex, I'm glad that you mentioned that, actually, because he did go from one end of the pitch to the other, right, to pull that defender. And the defender for the Whitecaps kind of got caught in between two places there, and he didn't commit either way. He didn't cover Cal either. So if Montero had passed the ball back to Cal, which I'm glad he went to Espinosa, because he tends to be a lot more clinical in front of goal. But if he had gone to Cal, he would have had a really great opportunity to score a goal as well. So I thought that was really great. But one of the things I've been concerned about, and I think a lot of folks have been concerned about, is the decision-making that Cal has made throughout the season. I think this is one of those moments where we can see that he has the ability to play like this, to improve that part of his game, because I don't think most folks would question his physicality. Even in a lot of ways, he's very good technically. He passes the ball really well. He hasn't been shooting as well, but he passes the ball really well. But it's the decision-making, right? A lot of the one-on-one situations. But we see there's this other aspect of his game that was well on display tonight. Robert, one thing that Alex had mentioned in his analysis right now was sort of the struggles that the Earthquakes had in the middle of the pitch. I think a lot of people picked up on that. What is like your point of view on how the team played centrally with Carlos Grueso, starting with Michael Baldissimo in the middle, and how did that kind of play out for the team, and why did they seem so vulnerable going up against the Whitecaps tonight?
Yes, it's interesting you asked that, because that was exactly the question I asked Luchi. They're not going to make the stat sheet. They're probably not going to be on Mob's player of the match, list in terms of their statistics, their numbers. But you had Baldissimo playing back in a stadium he's very familiar with, and basically left it all out there for 60 minutes. You had Carlos Grueso doing what he needed to do without being spectacular, and it's just enough to disrupt Vancouver that they couldn't, basically boss the midfield, for that full 45 minutes, that full 60 minutes that Michael's on the field. Look, it wasn't a stellar performance. The Quakes didn't win because Grueso and Baldissimo shut down Vancouver, but they did enough to force Vancouver to try the wing entries, and that was something that the Quakes were much better prepared to handle. So, disrupting Vancouver enough is something that I kind of wrote in my notes that I thought they did very well. And starting Baldissimo was clearly out of necessity. Judson is injured and still coming back from surgery. Jackson is out for the game because of yellow card accumulation, and so putting a player in there that has kind of a lot to prove in a situation against his own team is something that you can take advantage of. It's a little bit of an edge that maybe he provided that another midfielder might not have. When Nico Shakaris came in, he played well, but I don't think he had the bite that I saw Baldo at times have. Again, they did enough to kind of disrupt Vancouver and not allow them to be completely comfortable in the center. Again, just like you said, Phil, it wasn't that Vancouver was stymied in the center, but they were just disrupted enough that they couldn't take advantage of the Quakes. Alex is over there biting his lip. I know he has something to say here.
Yeah, Baldissimo and Grezzo don't deserve credit for this victory. All of that credit has to go to Danielle. That was a man of the match performance. That is, the kind of performance that's going to get him player of the season, right? There's no question at this stage that Danielle has single-handedly saved this team at least 7 or 8 points over the course of the season. He's been a phenomenal addition to this team, and this performance was on Danielle. But I want to be sympathetic to Baldissimo and Grezzo because they were put in a very difficult situation. And I think they made the most of a difficult situation. The problem was not that they don't know how to defend. They do know how to defend. The problem was that the Quakes were giving Vancouver so much space in the midfield to Boston midfield. They were at a numerical disadvantage the entire first half. Vancouver, with that 3-5-2, had more numbers in the middle. They were able to bypass San Jose's front line way too easily. There was too much of a gap between the front line for San Jose and that midfield block. And so they were just having a ball getting in that open space and then playing between Baldissimo and Grezzo. And Baldissimo and Grezzo, we want to give them credit because they were just able to hold on, but it could have very easily gone the other way.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things where, like, when you're watching Baldissimo play with the ball, he was one thing that I don't know that he does as well as like Jackson Yule or even Jack Skane, as we've seen in the last couple of matches, is really like take control and be that sort of pivot point in the midfield, like the one who can like boss, distribute, push the ball up the field themselves, and like be the focal point that Vancouver has to deal with. And it felt like there were so many times in the match where like Baldissimo, Montero, Grueso were kind of just like very quickly moving the ball around. And there was never any moment where like the one individual player was forcing the issue for the team. And I think that was quite a bit of an issue for the Earthquakes as well, in terms of, being a little bit more proactive offensively. Like they were allowing Vancouver to have a lot of possession. So Robert, we're going to kick it over back to you really quickly here, kind of just rounding out some of the analysis for the match. If there was any other points you wanted to cover, like the defensive performances, you had already mentioned the Jonathan Mensah sub, maybe some of the tactical changes that Luchi Gonzalez made. As they went through the end of the match, we did see some other subs as well. Nico Chakiris was one, so we got to see him play for a little bit. One person that we did not get to see was Matthew Hockby. A lot of people have been anticipating his entry into the match. Robert, you have any other specific points you wanted to chat about?
I don't remember. Jamon Moore asked a perfect question of Luchi about some of those second half adjustments, and Alex might remember more of the details than I do. But the way the formation changed and the way that they basically took the advantage of the last 30 minutes. They had a 1-goal lead and they compacted the field and did what they needed to do. Again, I said it earlier. Danielle was definitely the player of the match, and it's for the heroics in the first 45 minutes. He didn't have to make a spectacular save in the second half because of the way the defensive structure of the Quakes was able to keep Vancouver at bay. If Richie Lerea puts a couple shots on goal in the first half instead of being selfless like he did, maybe Vancouver takes that early lead and this game is very different. But that would be the one place that I think Vancouver is probably going to be kind of clenching their fists so they didn't take the opportunities that they did have and basically allowed Danielle to be that superstar tonight. I wanted to make a comment about the counterattack. Luchi mentioned it as well in the press conference because it wasn't asked directly, but the play of Jeremy Ebobisse, the selflessness to make that pass, that was the Quakes' one shot on goal tonight, and they made it count. That's the beauty of soccer. As long as you get the one shot and you put it in the back of the net, you might walk away with the 3 points. I think it sounded like he was a bit disappointed that they couldn't muster anything else up, but he also didn't seem too concerned that the offense wasn't clicking in the way that I think, watching on TV, it would have been nice to see the Quakes find a second goal or really kind of put more pressure on Vancouver to kind of play the ball in their half of the field. But again, I said it earlier, and I think it's really important to remember, this is the kind of game that you may look at the forum guide a month from now and say, oh, cool, the Quakes got a win on the road. That's pretty awesome. But the way they got this win is not a blueprint for the way you want to play every road game, but it's the kind of performance they're going to need at some point if they're going to continue being successful. If they're going to make a run into the playoffs, if they're going to make any noise in the playoffs, they're going to be the underdog, and probably a big underdog at times. And they're going to have to do something like tonight to come out on the right side of the results.
And the thing that makes me really optimistic about this one, Robert, is that it felt like the Quakes had depth. It felt like they were making defensive substitutions in the second half that made them better. And that's not the case. That hasn't been the case for the entirety of this season. But the Mensah sub to bring him on and go 5 at the back was a solid call. That helped shut down Vancouver, block up the space, also helped them defend aerially some of those crosses. You had Paul Marie coming on. That's a good defensive sub in my book. He was pressuring the back line, making Vancouver uncomfortable, preventing them from getting in dangerous crossing situations. You had Nico Shakiris come on. I don't think he covered himself in glory, but he is a workhorse. He's willing to get back and put in a solid shift, and that was enough tonight. And you had Ayo Akinola come on for a really solid performance, and having him come on in those late game situations, just as someone to receive the ball as a 9, to cause trouble against the back line, and to disrupt some of that initial build out from Vancouver was huge, because that is not a player that San Jose had at the beginning of this season. And that's not they didn't have somebody on the roster who could do that. We saw Jeremy Ebobisse go 90 minutes game after game and look exhausted by the end of the field. And the Quakes were essentially playing down 1 in a lot of these games, because Jeremy Ebobisse didn't have enough left in the tank every week to make all those runs. But Ayo Akinola is a huge addition in there. And given the way that Leach has now constructed this roster, having him back there, it feels like the Quakes are much, much more solid and well prepared to go into these late game situations where they're holding a lead. And that's something they're going to need if they're going to go to the playoffs. Having that depth is really critical. And this isn't even a team that's fully fit. You're right. They have Judson out. They have Jackson Ewell out. They have 2 key midfield players gone. So they were missing 2 players, and Jack Scan as well. And yet it still felt like they had good depth. So that was what made me optimistic about this one. And I want to welcome back Jamon Moore as well. Jamon, were you able to get any post-game quotes for us? Were you able to grab any of the players and harass them on their way out of here?
I was able to grab Tanner Beeson and just to be clear, first, it's a madhouse down there. And this is an NFL-sized stadium, so it's a madhouse getting there. It's a madhouse getting back. But down there, around the Quakes locker room, lots of excitement. People obviously feeling very, very good about getting out with this win. And Florian Youngworth is down there saying hi to everyone. So that kind of slowed down the process of being able to grab a player. And their turnaround in order to be able to get to the airport, when I got there, they're like, yeah, we're leaving in 5 minutes. So that was the pressure that we were under to be able to deliver. So yes, we did get 3 questions in with Tanner Beeson. If you want, I can play it now.
And, you have the audio. This is a stellar journalist on top of his game in his prime
This is why we do it. So 3 questions for Tanner Beeson. Here we go.
Beeson, Tanner, huge 3 points tonight. The back line held strong and got a clean sheet. It felt like a game you guys really had to suffer in. Talk about kind of what they threw at you, particularly in the first half, where they were breaking lines and creating a lot of havoc for you guys in the box.
Yeah, obviously they played 2 strikers, which is not something everyone does, and 2 big guys. So it's always going to be a little bit more busy for us centrally, and then they're pretty direct and have guys to play off of those direct balls. So they were dangerous in the first half, and maybe we weren't compact enough at times to make it as difficult as we could have. And I thought we kind of weathered the storm a little bit, got a goal in a great transition moment, and then set up much more comfortably in the second half to yes, have pressure, but manage it more comfortably.
Yeah, and a huge performance from Daniel tonight. Several key saves. He's been big for you guys this season and really helped you get points in several games. But tonight's got to be maybe the most important 3 points of all so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's big to get 3 points on the road after a bit of a break. It's difficult to get back out there after weeks off, and so big 3 points on the road. Difficult to win away from home in this league. And yeah, Daniel was big time.
Final question: adjustment in the later in the game to be able to bring in the three in the back, something you guys have done in a few games this season, and generally speaking, it's worked pretty well. How comfortable, are you when you see that you're bringing on, Jonah Mensah there to be able to make it three in the back? Are you like, finally, we're getting a bit more help back here?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome to have the option to bring someone of that caliber, with that experience on the field in a difficult moment. He's going to be able to manage that with comfort. I thought he did great coming on with some clearances, and then also connecting passes in some tight moments. And so, yeah, we're comfortable with that. That setup, bringing on an extra center back, as you said, we've done in the past, and do it when necessary.
All right, absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it, and enjoy the 3 points.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take care.
Safe travel.
All right, our Tanner Beeson there with Florian Young worth about 10 feet away. He was embracing each player as they came out of the locker room. Maybe not Ayo Ekinola, I'm not sure. Might have skipped him. But most of the players that were coming out at the time, he knew very well. Got to catch up a little bit with some of the Quakes front office, coaching staff. Obviously, everyone extremely pleased to get out of here with the 3 points, regardless of how it happened. But certainly the thing everyone was talking about down there was Daniel's performance tonight.
I think without a doubt, not only man of the match, but, clearly all 3 points are his tonight. Whatever game ball or award goes out in the locker room, or in this case on the bus ride back to the airport, is got to go for Danielle. Jamon, you asked a great question there, and I was really happy to hear Tanner's response at the end, because Alex was talking about this too. This is one of those games where it felt like the Quakes were maybe even better with the substitutions they were able to make, as opposed to, games past where it always felt like if they had to make a sub, or if they did make a sub, that they might be hanging on for dear life at that point. Is that the sensation you got as well from your vantage point watching this game at the end?
Yeah, I felt the subs were kind of extremely well managed tonight. And even, just the decision to bring on Paul Marie as a winger, to be able to both give a little bit more on the defensive side, but also Paul Marie, if the counter is on, if those numbers get pushed too far forward, by Vancouver, having Paul Marie out there to run at that back line and with some fresh speed, I think was a really good move. It could have easily been like, hey, let's give, Matthew Hoppe his debut, or, let's put out Benji Kikanovic. But I think it was the right move. I really do, and that one felt pretty smart to me. The other thing I like is seeing Jonah Mensah, regardless of his situation and with the club at this point. And everyone I talk to is like, no, it's very positive. There's not really a problem here. And one of the things that I heard was that one of the reasons that they are giving the time to Tanner is because competitively it's very close, but also Rodriguez, they feel, is a bit better on the right side. So it's a nod to where Rodriguez's own strengths are, and him being a center back that they've re-upped the loan for. And I think they've got to be interested, if the money is right, to be able to bring him back next year. So in that situation, in a situation where maybe Mensah doesn't come back, you certainly can understand why they want to put everything into Rodriguez, make sure they're getting the value, out of this loan, and then make a decision, because it's probably not cheap if they want to buy that contract out. So, you can kind of understand why, that is a reason they want Rodriguez on the right side, and they're very comfortable with what Tanner Beeson brings on the left. But just to be able to bring on someone like a Jonah Mensah to a back three late in the game, huge, right? There's not many teams in the league that can bring on a center back that you would say is probably as good as the two that are out there already. And it's worked much more often than it has not worked this season, to go a bit more defensive and bring that on. And Vancouver was just dumping in crosses, toward the end when they weren't getting fouled, but they were dumping in those crosses left and right, and the Quakes looked very, very comfortable clearing it out almost every single time.
Before we go on really quickly here, I want to take a moment to shout out QuakesEpicenter.com. For folks who are joining us here tonight who have not seen our website, who have not checked it out, make sure you go over to QuakesEpicenter.com. That is what houses the Aftershock. all of the articles that are written by our wonderful journalist. Robert's got the cup there. You check out our shop as well, where you can get one of our wonderful scarves, as you can see the one right behind me there. You can also, there we go. You can also find the Patreon on our website. For just a couple dollars a month, you can get early access to our content. For $5 a month, you can get access to the Patreon Slack, which most of us were very active on tonight. It was a lot of fun. So I want to encourage folks to go check that out. Follow us on social media. Are we calling it X now? I don't know if that's a thing or not. Are we calling it that? We still say Twitter.
I still say Twitter.
Follow us on Twitter, Quakes Epicenter, and on Instagram and Threads. You can follow us on there at Quakes Epicenter as well. I wanted to continue with Jamon here. Alex, I know you had something you wanted to say, but considering we just got Jamon back and he has the stadium perspective, I have a question for him.
This is not a fake background. I'm actually here.
Yeah, and actually, it's so cool looking. It is almost fake, but yeah. I'm curious, Jamon. The first 22 minutes of the game, the Quakes didn't have a shot on goal, and so I'm just curious, like, what you were seeing there, what they were struggling with, particularly what that looked like, and what you attribute a lot of those struggles to. Because at that point of the match, we fully expect this team to have at least taken an opportunity to score a goal, and it wasn't until Jeremy Abobasi had that header, which really wasn't much of an opportunity in itself. So what were you seeing, and what do you attribute a lot of that difficulty to?
Yeah, we talked a bit about the kind of the 4-3-3 defensively, and I just don't feel like it matched up very well with the 3-5-2, because you're already giving up the central midfield 3 versus 2, and then you're dealing with 2 strikers. So your center backs have to occupy the 2 strikers. And what it did is it created situations, and Cade Cowell defensively looked just lost. Like, he was just in no man's land multiple times, and they had a lot of joy on their right side, the Quakes left side, being able to find their wing backs, and that was causing a lot of problems tonight. So I do feel that, it looked to me a little bit more 4-4-2, because they always seem to have a second guy coming out, but Luchi called it a 4-5-1, and that felt like a pretty good answer, that would deal a bit more with the wing back situation, and also have enough there to be able to occupy the center of the pitch, so that you weren't just getting outgunned. And so that, starting off in that particular configuration, I don't think they did them any favors. We talked with one of the technical staff that was up here around the press box at halftime, and basically said, the idea of trying to match up to their back line, the 3 versus 3, kind of makes sense when you're putting the pressure, but those opportunities were few and far between. And then when the Quakes won the ball, they were so under pressure. They were double teamed a lot and everything, because those numbers were already forward for Vancouver. So they already had the numbers forward. So it was very easy for them to put on pressure to a Capo or to Rodriguez or Cade or whomever got on the ball next. It was really easy to kind of double and turn them over and be able to keep the ball in the other end because of those numerical mismatches.
All right, sounds like you're attributing it mostly to the formation, those mismatches that they had there, the parts that you just mentioned. Alex, kicking it back over to you and your response to what Jamon had said previously, or it looks like Robert, you wanted to jump in.
I think Robert's pointing up to me.
I'm just pointing at Alex. He's the man up here.
That's what I like. First of all, Jamon is 100% right. That the numerical situation wasn't working for the Quakes in the first half, and that's why they were getting pummeled in the midfield. The thing that I wanted to jump in on, because that's honestly not entirely concerning to me. I don't think they're going to play a ton of teams like the Vancouver Whitecaps, who are very, very comfortable in the 3-5-2, who have a defensive midfielder like Andres Cubas, who can step in and completely break down San Jose like that. Moving forward, and I'm not worried about, because they're also going to be playing more games at home, and they don't play as passively at home. We know that they can play more aggressively, more on the front foot, and they can trigger the press better at home. So I'm not worried about that. What I was focusing on was the second half situation, because I do think that is a situation that the Quakes are going to find themselves in again repeatedly over the course of this season. And the thing that I wanted to comment on was the Matthew Hoppe absence tonight, because we have seen a couple comments here in the Slack asking where Matthew Hoppe was. I'm not entirely sure, Jamon, if he's cleared to play at this point. yet for San Jose. And even if he's not clear to play, I don't think that this was a good situation for him. I think when you're holding on to a lead in the late second half, 1-0 away from home, there's only downside to starting him. So I'm not concerned at all. I am as eager as everyone else for him to make his hat trick debut, but I think that can wait until next weekend.
Yeah. So, I mean, I saw Hoppy walk out of the locker room after the game. Look, if he wasn't cleared to play, he wouldn't be here because there were players that were left behind. So just to be, perfectly clear, I think he is medically cleared to be able to play, but I more agree with this isn't the right game to put him in. You didn't need a goal. You already had a bunch of yellow cards. You didn't need to CONCACAF the game up even more. I think bringing him in would have just felt like a square peg in a round hole. Like, I don't even know where you would have put him unless you wanted him to chase people instead of Ayo Akinola. And I thought Ayo did okay, for the most part. He's a bit slow, at times, but, he did his job, and he won a few aerials and he was able to bring the ball down and help the Quakes hold on to the ball a bit. So I thought it was a pretty good sum to bring him on. I don't know that Matthew Hoppy would have provided necessarily the same at a striker position as a hold-up guy in that situation where you're trying to hold the ball and be able to get your attack going.
Yeah, I do think that Hoppy does add something in the last 20 minutes. We know that his shithousery is excellent. That is one of his highlight skills. There is the way that he can get in players' faces, in coaches' faces in the last 10, 15 minutes. So we know that he is another option to play up there. And honestly, Jamon, I think you're right. I think he makes sense if you're going 2 at the top. And that's a formation that we've seen the Earthquakes play a few times in the last few games under Luchi Gonzalez. But I think that is where he belongs, in the 2 in the top. I don't think it makes sense to put him out wide in an unfamiliar spot. And I think that Ayo Akinola is a great bet up top in the number 9.
Yeah, when Akinola came in, there was definitely a change for the team in terms of their grittiness in that part of the pitch. I think he really kind of changed their approach to the match. Guys, we are getting closer to the hour mark here, and with the 4 of us, I think it's time for us to go ahead and shift over to the final thoughts section of the show. And so I want to bring Robert back into the conversation. Robert, what are your thoughts leaving this 1-0 win for the Earthquakes against the Vancouver Whitecaps?
Look, we're at the point of the season where every game is going to be kind of magnified as it relates to the standings, as it relates to the chase to make the playoffs. If you look at the standings at this point, following that 3-point victory, the Earthquakes are essentially, I believe, third or maybe even fourth, or not third, but 4th or 5th in the conference in points per game right now. That's fantastic. I mean, that's what an away victory can do for you. You've got Christian Espinosa, who's now tied for 2nd in the league in goals scored. Something that the Earthquakes made a concerted effort this year to make sure that he got more involved in the offense, that he was able to get his chances and he was able to take his chances. I think that's another, again, positive sign for this Earthquakes team. And then lastly, a kind of a kudos to Jamon, who's out there in Vancouver and made the venture across the border. I love having you on site. And maybe more than anything, I'm really impressed that you're able to get the BC Place folks to turn on the blue lights there in the stadium.
Big thank you to my driver who got me here.
All right.
Otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Was that Brian in the background?
Brian Hoovler.
I was going to say, well, we need to give a shout out to Brian Hoovler, who is an esteemed patron of Quakes Epicenter. Wow. He's the reason Jamon was able to get up there to Vancouver. And he was also confusing the heck out of me because he was in Jamon's sheet the entire time Jamon was gone. And I had no idea.
He was protecting the computer while I'm down in the locker room. I didn't want the computer to get stolen or something.
Well, we appreciate Brian very much.
Amazing. Our patrons are amazing. But good job with the blue coloring there in the stadium. I know BC Place glows nicely after a Quakes victory, and we don't see too many of them in Vancouver. So good job.
So we do have our own kind of potential issue here, which is that they close the parking garage, after games are done, after so much time, and we are running up against that time. So we are going to need to say goodbye. I think I've given all the thoughts I would like to give for tonight, but I wanted to just say a huge thank you to everyone. Good crowd tonight. Thanks for showing up apologies on the press conference audio. What we will do, of course, as we've done before when that's messed up, is we will put it up also on YouTube, and we'll put a link into the show so that you can get access to that. Of course, if you're in the Patreon, that link will get shared with you on the Patreon, in the Slack as well, so that you can be able to get it there. But we better go, otherwise, we might find the car in the impound lot, and it's a nice one, so we don't want that to happen. So,
Jamon, I've heard Vancouver's a lovely city. You can just stay there for the weekend, take a nice vacation on Quakes Epicenter credit card.
Yes, wish I could. But have a good night, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining in, and I'll turn it back over to you three.
All right, Alex. Well, I guess you're up next then. What are your final thoughts leaving the match?
Okay, the one reason that I'm bummed that Jamon is gone is because we didn't get to dig in about the Cade Cowell transfer, because you brought it up right at the top of the show, Phil. But I was saving it for the end, for dessert here, because regardless of what happened in this game, I think that the bigger story in the San Jose Earthquakes universe this week is what's been going on with Cade Cowell. There are multiple reports by Jeff Carlisle, Tom Bogert, the best of the best, that Bologna, Serie A team, have put in multiple bids for Cade, and I have good sourcing that interest is very real, those bids are very real, and the details that are out there are that it was initially a $3.5 to $4.5 million bid, that then the Earthquakes wanted more, Chris Leach wanted more, and Bologna put in a revised new offer that would get it closer to the number that Chris Leach was looking for. Now, we also know, according to Robert Jonas, who was in the midweek press conference, that Luchi Gonzalez has acknowledged these ongoing transfer rumors swirling. So this is a very real dialogue. It's a very real possibility that Cade Cowell departs the San Jose Earthquakes for Italy sometime in the next few weeks. I think there's 2 weeks or a little less now left in the Serie A transfer window for the Quakes to be able to secure a deal. And my take on this is that the Earthquakes need to secure a deal. It has always been the goal for the San Jose Earthquakes to move Cade Cowell to Europe. And for the last year and a half, this summer has been the target. You've had the Gold Cup, which was a perfect opportunity for him to showcase what he can do. You have the appearances he made for the U.S. men's senior team and scored a goal in the Gold Cup. He looked good at the Gold Cup. His stock has never been higher. Now is the perfect time for him to sell, and there's no point in holding on to him because it feels like his growth is plateauing. It feels like he doesn't have a perfect spot in Luchi Gonzalez's system, and it feels like his development will be better served elsewhere. We can see how good he plays for the U.S. men's national team. We can see what his potential is. He needs to go elsewhere to realize that potential. And that's something that he's been clear about as well. He has been clear about the fact that he wants to leave this summer. He said that at the very beginning of the season, he was 100% clear. His goal was to secure a transfer to Europe this summer. This is a concrete offer from Bologna on the table. Might not be exactly what Chris Leach is looking for, but I don't think that Chris Leach should risk scuttling a deal. I don't think it's worth it to risk missing out on the perfect time transfer in order to eke an extra million out of this deal, eke an extra couple $100,000. I think that there's a huge opportunity here, and the Earthquakes do not want to waste this opportunity because it's important for Cade. It's important for all the other young players in the club, right? All the, the Oscar Verhovens, all the Cruz Medinas who want to go to Europe someday, who need to be able to trust when they sign that homegrown contract with the Quakes, that the Quakes are going to get them to Europe, that they're going to stand up for their players and do what's best for their players. And what's best for Cade right now, what Cade wants right now, is to go to Europe. And I think it feels like this is the right deal. From everything I understand, it feels like this has been the right time and opportunity for him to do so. So I think it's really crucial. I'm going to be watching over the next few weeks if Chris Leach can get this over the line, because this could be a career-defining negotiation for Chris Leach, right? Because the Earthquakes aren't routinely selling players for $4 to $5 million. That's not anything that Quakes have ever done before. That is a significant amount of money for this organization, just in terms of cash influx. And it's also significant in terms of the roster maneuvers that they will be able to do. The gam and tam that they get from that will give them a lot to work with next season and to become a selling club. And that's the big picture goal here, is that they want to become a team like the Philadelphia Union. They want to become a selling team in Major League Soccer who can grow players and turn them over to Europe. And this is their big opportunity, and they need to make it happen.
No, I completely agree with you on that, Alex. I feel like this is one of the points that the front office hasn't done well with yet, because I don't know that they're quite at that part of the development of the youth through the academy. Although we're seeing it now, right? We're seeing some of these players come up like Cade Cowell, like Nico Chiqueras. We're seeing some of these promising young guys who have the opportunity to go play over in Europe. I think the front office has done so many good things in the past like year or two, especially after releasing Matias Almeida and kind of like pivoting and switching with Covello and then moving to Luchi Gonzalez and kind of changing the way that the team operates, right? The player acquisitions over the past year have been excellent. I happened to listen in on your conversation with Jamon about Matthew Hoppe coming into the organization and kind of some of the things that the front office did up to that point. And I just think that they've been doing so well in that, and it's just like selling off these players to Europe is like the one last missing piece that a successful American Major League Soccer club does. You mentioned Philadelphia Union and FC Dallas. I mean, those are the two prime examples. It would be nice if the Quakes could be a part of that conversation. And it's not just because it's great for the roster. Like you mentioned, they would be getting some money for targeted allocation, for general allocation, targeted allocation for, being able to pay down Jamiro Montero's designated player contract, for example, would be incredibly helpful to make space for other parts of the roster, right? But also as an organization, I think it's really great for the Earthquakes to have that name, that they can be a place that can develop youth and sell off talent to Europe as well. I think that looks really great. And you said like the promise of the contract, knowing that the clubs can actually come to San Jose from Europe and expect that the Quakes can follow through on providing that talent for those teams. And I think that's really important for the organization. It's really important for Major League Soccer and the development of the sport in the country as well. So really exciting to see players like Cade Cowell, who could really help to change the way the organization is run in the long term. And then just as like a Central Valley guy, I mentioned this before, it's really exciting to see somebody from Series like do so well and then go off to do something big, like possibly play in Italy in the Premier Division there. So yeah, that was kind of like my last thought there. Anyway, Alex,
it's so much bigger than Cade. It's so much bigger than this one transfer. It means so much.
It means a lot to a lot of young kids too.
And if they don't make this transfer happen and that's a wasted opportunity, that is a pretty devastating blow to this organization. I'm curious, Robert, if you share that same sentiment and if you took away anything else from the midweek conversation you had with Luchi Gonzalez.
In talking to Luchi, he's had this experience in FC Dallas before. That was a club that was not afraid to pull the trigger, to sell players, even at stages before we've seen Cade Cowell reach. They weren't afraid to sell a Brian Reynolds and others at times in their careers where they were fringe players for the first team in Dallas. And he had a plan. It didn't always work, but he was used to the idea that was going to be part of the ethos of the club, and that he was going to be able to manage that. He hinted that he's already in that mode here in San Jose, that he and the coaching staff already recognize what a post Cade Cowell roster is going to look like and how they're going to adjust moving forward. There's honestly no real reason to stop this at this point. If you're fighting over dollars, you're being penny wise but pound foolish, because you have an opportunity to tell every youth player in Northern California that the Earthquakes are a viable pathway to their dreams, to their goals, to those moves that they want to make. And if the Quakes lose out $500,000 today on Cade Cowell, they're going to make it up in multiples with those next wave of players that are willing to trust the Quakes organization to get them to that next step. Look, we're seeing USL already make very good business moves to sell players overseas. And if that pathway becomes, robust, you've got Sacramento, you've got Oakland right here in the backyard of the Bay Area. They could easily be siphoning off players that would say, why should I go spend time in San Jose, get trapped in San Jose, when Sacramento and Oakland are going to facilitate my path forward? And again, that would be just a loss of money, not just in the short term, but a huge loss in reputation and money in the long term. I think the Quakes have to make the move for so many reasons. And Alex, yes, you're absolutely right. This is so much more than just the transfer of Cade Cowell at this point. And I think a lot of eyes are on what the Earthquakes organization is willing to do.
And I think it's the sign of a confident, successful, and bullish organization that they're willing to pull the trigger, make a decision, make a hard decision. It's obviously a hard decision. Whenever that much money is involved, a new situation for the club, there's a lot of pressure on Chris Leach to make the right call here, and totally understand that. But it's the sign of a healthy organization that they're willing to do that, and they're leading here with optimism for the future, with hope and our ability to build the academy and to have more players like Cade Cowell come through in the future, that they're willing to make this decision. If you don't make this decision,
Alex,
it tells me that they're making it out of fear.
Thing here that I think we're missing is like we keep talking about like how important this Cowell transfer is. It's because there hasn't been transfers like this before. We haven't seen the organization do it. So the hope is that like once this goes through, they'll kind of have that freedom to operate more normally in that fashion. I think that's the big thing here, because so much pressure is being put on the player himself, right? We hear everything from the fans and how they feel about him, and like getting him sold off as quickly as possible before he loses his value. I don't know that they're necessarily having these conversations and these other organizations that just regularly sell off players to Europe. And so that's one of the things I think we're missing here is it's like once the seal is broken, once Cade is sold off to a big European club, then I believe a lot of that pressure is going to be off those players, off the organization, off the fans too, who get a lot of anxiety about the players performing so they get sold for good value.
Yeah, but my worry is that fear is inhibiting their decision making here. Because if you're approaching this from a perspective of fear, then you're going to say, okay, this is our one big shot. We can't blow it. We need to maximize value on Cade at all costs because we're never going to have another player like Cade Cowell coming through the ranks. That's not true. They already have multiple players in the youth academy who could realistically in the future garner transfer fees like that. They need to be willing to move on from Cade Cowell to sell at the right time and then go invest in those younger players, because Cade Cowell is also taking up spot on the roster, right? If you have Cade Cowell in Bologna doing good things in Italy, that clears up room for Benji Akinovic to try to make another run at this starting lineup, because we know how successful he's been able to be in the past, and he's gotten buried right now, and that's not good. We know we want to see more of Matthew Hoppe. Matthew Hoppe is another player who, if he comes here and makes an immediate impact, and he could realistically then be a quick turn that they do, right? They can get that permanent option that they have and then sell him on very quickly. And so they need to clear space on that roster in order for this club to move forward and grow in 2024 and beyond.
I think it's a good place to leave the show tonight because we're going to find out more as the week goes on, right? And the situation with Cade Cowell, we'll kind of see how things develop as the Quakes play their next match against Sporting Kansas City. Could be a really good opportunity for Matthew Hoppe to get to make an impact for this team right off the bat as well, against especially a team that's lower in the table. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining us tonight, especially through some of the difficulties we had early on. I know it was like super awkward for a lot of the folks who were in the chat with us, for us who were sitting here trying to get things figured out. So thanks for hanging around with us. We had really good numbers tonight. And I want to once again invite everybody to visit quakesepicenter.com. Check out our articles. Visit us on YouTube if you're not already with us right now. If you're listening to us on Spotify or one of the other podcasting listening services, make sure you check out YouTube. It's a lot of fun. There's the ongoing chat throughout the show. Make sure you like and subscribe and turn on those notifications. And once again, follow us on social media at Quakes Epicenter on Instagram, on Threads, and on Twitter, or X, whatever we're calling it these days. And thank you guys for such a good show tonight, and have a good night.